welcome to our YouTube channel. As UMass Informs student chapter, we are very happy to be back with a brand new interview with a brilliant researcher, Dr. Muge Capan. Last month, Dr. Muge Capan gave an amazing talk for our chapter speaker series, and today we are so honored to welcome her for an interview that she kindly accepted. So first of all, I would like to say thank you for being here, Dr. Capan, and thank you for accepting our invitation, and welcome to our YouTube channel.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
So I will start with a brief introduction for those who weren't with us at the talk. Dr. Muge Capan is an assistant professor at the Mechanical and Industrial Engineering Department at UMass Amherst. She graduated from North Carolina State University with a PhD degree in Industrial and Systems Engineering with a minor in Operations Research. Prior to joining UMass Amherst, she served as the Associate Director of Health Systems Optimization at Christiana Care Health System, leading cross-disciplinary teams as a PI and co-PI on federally funded projects by NSF and NIH, focused on data-driven solutions for timely diagnosis, personalized treatment, and clinical risk. So we have a professional here who is combining both industrial and research academia experience. And we would like to start with a question that is kind of focusing on that. So your journey in industrial and system engineering is really remarkable for us. And can you share what inspired you to pursue a career in this field, specifically focusing on operations research in healthcare systems?
Well, first of all, thank you Thank you so much for the great introduction. I'm very honored to be here and talking to you. So as for the inspiration, I would say I was kind of born into it. I would start with, in terms of health systems engineering, I was born to a family of a lot of pharmacists and doctors. So healthcare was always part of my life. And developing an interest in quantitative methods, I considered different options, how I can combine healthcare and quantitative modeling, and it led me to industrial engineering in my undergraduate degree. And the actual application of healthcare really came during the graduate program when I was at North Carolina State University. I had an opportunity to go to one of the seminar talks. I'm sure you guys are all going to department seminar talks. And we had a speaker from Mayo Clinic. And it was absolutely mind-blowing and eye-opening for me. And I remember speaking to the presenter after the seminar, and it really resulted in this internship. And which then turned into my summer project, which then turned into a dissertation. And it really led me more and more towards studying health systems and how they operate, and made me realize how incredible it is to be able to use the tools that we learn in operations research for something so impactful, influencing human life. So that really was the motivation for me. And from then on, it's just led to different industry positions and research positions. So I have a little bit of an untraditional path, if you will. But overall, I'm very glad to be in this position where I can leverage the tools and methods that we have for something so meaningful.
You say that it is so untraditional, but it is also so inspiring. And I'm sure a lot of people who see this interview or who hear from you will also get inspired. I want to ask, was that seminar related to what you do right now, or did you kind of come up with that research after that seminar during your internship and afterwards?
That's a good question. It was related. It was more of an overview of the problems they were facing in the healthcare system at that point. And it was more of an overview of multiple projects they were working on. And one of them actually became my dissertation, which was focused on understanding physiological deterioration in medical general wards, where the providers are not necessarily prepared resource-wise and skill-wise to handle an acute deterioration. So it's very important for them to predict who's going to deteriorate so that they can move them up. So we call it a care escalation. And that is a very challenging decision because of the resources that are limited. Every care escalation means we're taking away resources from someone else. So that really was one of the projects that the speaker mentioned, and then eventually it did become part of my research.
That is very interesting. So I would like to move to your tenure as the Associate Director of Health Systems Optimization at Christiana Care Health System. So there you led cross-disciplinary teams on significant projects, and could we hear a little bit more about that, and how did this experience influence your approach to health systems optimization and developing these data-driven healthcare solutions?
Yeah, that's also an excellent question. After graduating from North Carolina State University, I had the opportunity to join Christiana Care Health System, which is a large community-based hospital in Delaware. And at that point, the hospital, as many other hospitals do nowadays, had an internal unit focused on research. And the goal was utilize the incredible amount of data that the hospital system is generating at a daily basis. How do we use that data to make better decisions, ultimately impacting patient outcomes? And I had the great pleasure to join a team that was incredibly multidisciplinary. We had physicians from different departments, nurses, human factors engineers, computer scientists, biostatisticians, health systems engineers at various levels. We had students, interns working with us. And the best part of it was we had the data, which is very hard as an academic once you're outside of a system to find collaborators. But in that moment, we were part of the system. So, and it was so impactful to see the methods and models we developed being used by physicians and providers. It was really a rare case of seeing the implementation of your work right after you develop it. So I had an incredible time working with very talented researchers, clinicians, and I think that environment led to great ideas that we were able to apply to an NSF grant, which was a collaboration between North Carolina State University, Mayo Clinic, and Christiana Care. It was a 3-year Smart and Connected Health project where we focused on sepsis, which is a very big challenge for health systems. Led to another big scale NIH grant. But it was such a productive environment that those grants and collaborations became very naturally. So it was a wonderful place to really strengthen my research, my mentoring, collaboration, understanding how you develop this language across different disciplines, especially in healthcare. I think clinicians speak a very different language than engineers. And to be able to understand and work together, you really need to become bilingual. So I think Christiana Care is where I became bilingual in a sense that led through a lot of things afterwards.
That's a great way to put it, to become bilingual. And I think for researchers, especially in OR, OM, and MS, I think it makes a lot of sense to become bilingual and be able to translate your work into practitioners and practice, basically, to create impact. How long were you there in the Christiana?
I was there for 4 years.
4 years.
So I graduated in 2014, and I was there, for about 4 years.
And when you joined there, were you immediately leading a team, or were you did you have mentors and then became a mentor during that period?
The latter. So I joined and I had mentors and team members, and eventually I started as a researcher and then eventually moved up with more expertise and more practice.
So you both learned how to become a team member for a research team and also then become a leader for a research team.
Exactly, because you do need to develop that relationship and trust. As a new PhD, I think no matter where you start, you need to allow people time and allow yourself time to really understand the environment, understand the problems, and really show that you can add value. And once that threshold is crossed, then people start trusting you, especially if they're not used to working with engineers, which in healthcare, having an engineer on team is not necessarily a common concept.
Yeah.
So they may be, a little bit hesitant. Like, what can you help us with?
Exactly.
Like, what are these tools that you're using? So you really need to first develop that relationship to show them that you are there to help solve problems.
Yeah.
And then once that trust is there, then you can kind of start leading teams, take an initiative. Yeah, it takes time.
Yeah. But that's amazing. And the fact that you combined all these opportunities and I'm sure inspired a lot of people while we were there. And you continue to inspire people when you're here too.
I appreciate it.
So if we focus on your research a little bit more in detail right now, so it uniquely combines decision analysis, operations research, and machine learning. So how do these disciplines intersect in your work to inform these clinical decision-making under uncertainty concepts?
Yes. So my research is focused on, as you mentioned, clinical decision-making in different settings. It can be a hospital setting. It can be an ambulatory setting where we're dealing maybe with primary care patients. But at the end of the day, a lot of the problems lead to risk stratification because we have limited resources. So we want to know from a healthcare perspective, how do we best utilize the resources that we have? It can be beds, it can be physicians, it can be time. And so that really is operations research. So because we have objectives, we want to minimize adverse events, we want to protect vulnerable populations, we want to maximize the use that patients get out of the system. We want to move them through our emergency departments as quickly as possible. So there's the problem in its nature is operations research to me because it has a lot of data and it is aimed to informed decision making. So the decision analysis is always in the human side of the problem because at the end of the day, the data comes from humans and it's used by humans. So we have this patient-provider dynamic. And machine learning, I would say, is a newer concept that entered our world. It wasn't this big when I first started, and now I can't think of our work without machine learning. And I think machine learning is a tool that enables us to better dive into the data and understand patterns, especially when we're thinking about personalized medicine, understanding subgroups and how they have very different health trajectories. It really motivates us to think about why we should not develop one-size-fits-all solutions because every patient, every population is unique. So machine learning, I consider it more like an accelerator. And the core of the problem is an operations research problem. And at the end of the day, the purpose is a decision support. So decision analysis is kind of like the motivation that brings all of that together. Yeah.
So thanks to machine learning, we are able to stay away from one-size-fits-all kind of treatments and focus on underserved populations or people who were in some way in the health system kind of ignored or their needs were not addressed correctly. So machine learning also helps us move towards that direction and address those needs as well.
Absolutely.
Would you agree?
Absolutely.
That is amazing. That is also a very optimistic way of looking at how data and machine learning and AI and everything is moving these days because I feel like it can get a little overwhelming, but we can focus on positives like that. So thank you for bringing that up. So we started a little bit talking about health disparities, and they are certainly a significant concern in the medical field. And you've emphasized this in your research and in our talk right now. So could you elaborate on how your work contributes to a better understanding and addressing of these disparities?
Absolutely. So my research focuses on better understanding socially vulnerable or medically underserved populations and how their outcomes are disproportionately worse than other populations. And I think health disparities, no matter which care setting we focus on, they are a constant, and the gap between the groups are increasing. We have some studies looking at maternal health where we see significantly increasing gaps in adverse events experienced by different populations. When we look at primary care, we see this in socioeconomic and geographical disparities to a point where a zip code by itself can be very informative in terms of the social vulnerability and access to healthcare that people have. So health disparities is a fact of our life. And if we are working as engineers in this space, I think it's our responsibility to consider it in any modeling approach that we develop to make sure that what we are developing is helping those that are underserved. And this can be as simple as just quantifying who is being left behind. And even that becomes sometimes challenging because they're not necessarily in the data. Usually when we work with healthcare data, we work with people who touch the system. If someone is not really able to touch the system or doesn't know how to navigate the system, they become this underserved, not only underserved, but underrepresented data points. So no matter how well our algorithms are developed, they're not going to perform well in that group because they're just not there. So it's also a data challenge, I would say, that we're not seeing them, and what we develop works better for the majority when it comes to predicting bad outcomes. And I think those are really big challenges that we as engineers have to tackle.
Do you think your research contributes to those people who are more focused on data collecting? Is it giving them recommendations on representing those communities in their data, or is that something that you try to do in your work?
So I would say both. So we want to set examples of how you can consider health disparities in your modeling, but we also want to encourage other researchers to think critically about data sources or about their approaches in terms of understanding the trajectories of those socially vulnerable populations, but also protecting their privacy because of the fact that they're minority in our data. It becomes also very critical to make sure that their sensitive data is protected. We have a recent paper that we are hoping to submit in the next few weeks that utilizes multi-objective optimization and different machine learning methods to look at different privacy attacks, for example, in healthcare data for these socially vulnerable populations, just because of the reason that they are the minority. So when we share that data for secondary use, with researchers, how do we make sure that they're still protected? So I think it's consideration of those populations and their data to make sure that they're protected and included in our research.
Dr. Capan, in your research, you leverage both data and human insights to enhance health decision analysis. So in what ways do you integrate these elements to improve healthcare outcomes?
Thank you for this question. So when we work with healthcare data, we usually utilize structured patient-level data coming from electronic healthcare records, which a lot of healthcare systems collect these, and we have an incredible amount of information about labs and vital signs and demographics and diagnosis codes and procedures, all the things that patients are experiencing. But sometimes taking that data and trying to understand and develop models becomes very challenging without the context. So without understanding what processes lead to the collection of that data, who's entering it, where does that data live? Because being in the healthcare system made me really realize how isolated and siloed these data systems can be. So what we think as one big data system is actually a collection which is more like a labyrinth if you look at it, and not necessarily communicating with each other. So we need to be very critical about which process is generating data and where it is coming from. And that's where that's the first place, I would say, where the humans play a big role, because we need to work very closely with physicians, providers, and if possible, I would say, be in the environment where the data is being generated to understand those context that is missing. So if we just look at EHR, we may not be able to see what exactly is causing. So just to give you a concrete example, you may be able to see just by looking at someone's lab values. Let's say you're trying to understand who's at risk of diabetes. Blood sugar is one of the key features that we look at, and if it's very high, that would be an indication that you are maybe at risk of type 2 diabetes. But if I don't understand the context where that was measured, I may look at your value, it's extremely high, and I might say, oh, you are at risk of type 2 diabetes. Maybe we should diagnose you. In reality, if you look at all the other factors around it, maybe that value was measured while you were waiting in an emergency department for something completely unrelated to diabetes, and stress increases sugar levels. So if you don't understand where, when, how, if that value was collected on your hour 27 waiting in the emergency department with 100 other people for a maybe broken ankle, yes, your sugar value might be off the charts. That doesn't mean you have diabetes. Same thing with sepsis. We look at certain lab values, like lactate is a big indicator. If you go up and down the stairs multiple times, your lactate will go up. That doesn't mean you have sepsis. But some of the metrics of sepsis is elevated respiration, elevated heart rate, and lactate levels. It's part of the definition. But where, right? In what setting, in what environment, in what sequence, and what is your baseline? So all of that really is the human side. We can't just take the electronic health records, look at numbers and say, okay, this person is at risk, this person isn't. So that's one thing. And the other thing I think is not everything, again, is in the data. Some things are just hidden. It's connected to context, connected to process. We deal with that a lot in the asymptomatic phase of diseases. And there, again, the human knowledge comes into place, where we can talk to providers and say, tell me how you would categorize this patient, or how you would look at this data set and variables that we should focus on. If I have hundreds of variables, rather than me going in and trying to use maybe a dimension reduction, why not work with an expert who is actually working with those people? So I truly believe that we need to work with domain knowledge and data together to make an impact.
I love that you emphasized treating patients not as data points, but as like human beings. All of those data points are humans.
Exactly.
And they all, have a context that needs to be considered. And also I love that you are emphasizing something that I don't hear about at all, which is like almost like the backstage of data collection. And I love that you mentioned both of these things. And I want to, the next question is very relevant, so I want to move on to that, which is that impacting patient care directly through research is a significant achievement. And can you talk about a time when your research directly improved patient outcomes or care processes?
Thank you for this question. First of all, let me say that it's not very often as academics to develop something and then look back and say, oh, this is being used. Usually what we do ends up in papers, and it's a good thing. I mean, it's an accomplishment, but implementation is very rare and challenging. So when it does happen, I think it's very, very valuable. There's one example that comes to my mind where I was able to see that implementation, and that was during my time when I was at Christiana Care. We utilized patient-level data from general medical floor patients, looked at a lot of different features to understand who is at risk of deterioration, so that they would require to move up, meaning moving up to maybe a step-down unit or an intensive care unit, which the beds are very limited. So we want to be very careful about that decision. And what we did was we took all the data, but we incorporated a new element to it, which was nursing assessment. So we utilized information collected from nurses who are taking care of those patients 3 times a day, a very simple questionnaire about their gut feeling, basically. Like when you walk into a room as a nurse and you look at a patient, what is your reaction to their ability to do X, or the way they look, their cognition, their movement? And we utilize those in addition to patient level information to create a scoring system. We call them early warning systems in healthcare, where you basically take all these features, turn it into a score that is helpful for clinicians to use. And you can even color code it and say red means just call the ICU right now and move the patient. Yellow is maybe consider step down, and maybe green is you're okay where the patient is. We also call it care appropriate or risk appropriate care. And we developed this algorithm. We were able to work with the IT system and IT representatives to implement it into the EHR system. And it became an alert so that physicians or providers would see it. When someone gets a high score, they would see the score and recommendations that come with the score, saying, this is the score. The score by itself doesn't mean anything. If I say you are a 7, what does that mean? We need to say 7 means that people like you, 40% of the time within 24 hours ended up crashing.
Wow.
So that now is actionable, right? So you know the time, you know the risk, you know the probability, and then you as a provider make the decision. So as engineers, we never want to develop systems that take away the human from the decision. So the human will always be the decision maker.
We never want to dictate, say
exactly, but we want to enhance it. We want to improve it. So it became a part of the EHR system. It became an alert, and it was implemented initially in 2 units, eventually in 26 units, gradually, and impacted patient care. And I'm very, very proud of that score and the implementation.
That is amazing.
But it's so rare.
But that is really amazing. And I'm so amazed that all the number of different people all involved, the nurses were on board, the IT, of course, research people, all the practitioners. So that is just amazing. That is just a really collective work of your research basically being translated into something that actually impacted human life. And that must be one of the best feelings you can get as a researcher.
It was so empowering for nurses, because the bottom line was nursing assessment moved the needle. Because the vitals and labs and all the features that we use only got us to a certain precision and accuracy. And when we added nursing assessment, that made the difference. And we were able to say, look, this is your impact. This is how you assess the patient. And with your knowledge, our prediction gets better. And it was very empowering for nurses to see their impact, because they are there day in, day out. They're at the bedside.
Multiple times a day.
Exactly. How can we better utilize their knowledge? And it connects to the previous question about data and humans, I think. The human has to be in the loop. No matter what we do.
That is so amazing. It's so hard to move away from this example, but unfortunately I have to ask our last question. I wish we could just talk about it more and just record the entire thing. But so our last question is about mentoring, which I know you are passionate about, and mentoring undergraduate and graduate students has been a thing that you've been doing. So how do you approach mentoring, and what do you hope your students to take away from working with you?
Wonderful last question. I also wish we could go on. Mentoring, yes, mentoring is very near and dear to my heart. I was very fortunate to have excellent mentors myself. And to me, it's a way of giving back. Throughout my career, whether in industry or academia, I had incredible mentors helping me with various aspects of navigating work and life. And so because of that experience, I can see firsthand what kind of impact it makes. Especially for underrepresented populations, especially for women, I would say it's so important to see role models and be in a space where we feel that we belong and that we can make an impact. So I highly value graduate and undergraduate mentoring. Currently in my group, We have several PhD students and undergraduate students. And I truly believe that engaging more undergraduate students is a big component of training the future researchers and practitioners. Exposure is very important. Just giving some opportunity to involve undergrads in our research. And I had incredible undergraduate students working in our team that performed amazing tasks and became authors in papers. Wow. And beyond just data collection and lit review, sometimes they just, once they are given the resources and time, they can flourish in it becomes this incredible collaboration. And within the team, I think it's also important for graduate students to mentor undergrads. I think there's this academic family feeling to a research lab that I personally very value. I would say for students who are working with me, again, if they're taking a class with me or if they come to a seminar, I hope that I can come across as approachable so that they can come talk to me, learn about different ways that we do research. And if they're interested in healthcare, I always try to see if there's a good fit, it's always a timing issue, but if there's a good project, if the timing is right and the student's interested, I always welcome new students. And hopefully the experience is one that they feel valued, they feel included, they feel that they're learning something, so they're challenged. I want my students to be challenged, but in a good way, so that they can actually grow and also give back as they advance in the research lab. They can give back to the newcomers. So that's my approach to mentoring.
What an amazing answer. Thank you so much, Dr. Capan, for being a role model, for making people around you, students and people you work with, feeling valued and cared about, and also challenged in a good way, as you said. And thank you so much for accepting our invitation for this interview. This has been amazing, and I can't wait to see everything you will accomplish with your research and all the impact that you will have on these patients' lives and on in the practice in general. Thank you so much for being so inspiring. And with this, I would like to conclude our talk. Any last words you would like to say?
Thank you so much for inviting me. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you so much. And to our audience, thank you for watching another interview. This has been UMass Amherst Student Chapter of Informs. See you in our next interviews. Thank you.